Chag Sameach, everybody. Thank you all for, whether you're live streaming, and actually I don't know, oh, there's the camera, so for all you live streamers, thank you for joining, and for all the people in the room, I can find you very easily. So Chag Sameach, and thank you all for being here and studying together, and thank you, Yael, also, who was handing out source packets. If you're in this room and don't yet have a source packet, you can go right up to the wider chair of those 3 chairs in the front there. There's some extra source packets. So feel free to stick around and study with us. And we should have enough packets for everybody. I believe that there are 20, which is nice, and it is late. And for all those who may have been live streaming in early, waiting for us to start sooner, thank you for sticking around. It's always good to have more Torah to study, and what beautiful Torah and what fun Torah it's been tonight. Thank you all for being here again. I'm Rabbi Jonah Rank. I'm the president and Rosh Yeshiva of Hebrew Seminary, a rabbinical school for deaf and hearing. We are based in Chicago, but a lot of our operations are online, which is why I'm a very proud member of Temple Israel of Natick, where I happen to be married to my spouse wherever I go, not just here. But Rabbi Dr. Reish Weiss, senior co-rabbi. So in any event, I'm glad to be here and studying with all of you this evening. We are talking tonight. The title is Wearing Jewish Symbols in an Anti-Semitic World. Wearing Jewish symbols in an anti-Semitic world. This is a topic that is probably something that may have crossed your mind recently. There are all different forms of anti-Semitism. We're not going to get deep into analyzing what things are anti-Semitism and which things aren't anti-Semitism, but we're going to take some cases of relatively clear anti-Semitism, and if you disagree about them, you can, of course, raise your hand, just so that way those who are live streaming can have the full experience too. You should know that I might not pause often to take questions or to take comments, but if you have questions or comments, raise your hand or interrupt far more loudly than I would otherwise notice, and I will try to repeat what you say so that we can all have the same experience wherever we may be. I'll also say one more thing for those who are live streaming, in case there are live streamers out there. If you didn't get a source packet from the chair that's over there, which seems highly unlikely, there is a possibility that had you typed into your internet browser tinyurl.com/JewishHats, you would get the source packet. So again, if you're a live streamer and you're looking to follow along, the URL you want is tinyurl.com/JewishHats. Okay, now we can all get started together. I want to say that the real question that I want us to be able to answer is really, what do all the various forms of Judaism have to say about how Jewish appearances ought to change in the face of anti-Semitism? If I am someone who wears a Chai necklace, or I have Star of David earrings, or I wear my Hebrew name on a t-shirt, or I don't know why I would wear the same t-shirt every day unless I'm a cartoon character, or if I... Say that again? Or on the Great British Bake Off. Thank you, Cantor Broekhuizen. Or if I wear a kippot, which is, for me, a very real scenario that I do wear my kippot. Everywhere I go, that is not a shower. Yes, I would say that there are real problems that people actually do face with how they might appear Jewish, and how does one stop that from happening, and should one stop that from happening? So these are different questions we're going to engage with. Now, this is such a big question that you can see that an 8-page source packet should suggest to you that there is no simple answer. And in fact, a lot of the answers aren't going to be very simple practical advice. A lot of these answers that we're going to find are going to be more attitudinal, or maybe more emotional, or maybe even just suggested, like you might even feel it in the air of what the words and what these lessons over time and over history have had to say to us. So I want to start by looking at our first source, but I'm not going to read it too far in depth. I'm going to suggest that we do just a little bit of skimming, because it's a source that you're both probably very familiar with and possibly extremely unfamiliar with, which is the category I find myself with the book of 2nd Maccabees. The book of 2nd Maccabees, you might know, is the book that best preserves the story of the real uproar that the Jews were upset about over Hanukkah. And because it's such an important book to Jewish history, we left it out of the Tanakh and we never read it. So this is a book that instead is preserved in the Apocrypha, which is a whole collection of not necessarily always authored by the people who authored it, but that's the same thing for the Hebrew Bible anyway. But anyway, this is a series of books that largely have a place in the Christian canon and less so in the Jewish canon, but have made their way, a lot of the books of the Apocrypha have kind of made their way over to the Jewish bookshelf in the last 200 or so years. And actually at Temple Israel, we can be very proud that our very own professor Jonathan Klawans was one of the main editors of the Jewish annotated Apocrypha. So fun facts when you go to Temple Israel. Anyway, it's a really important collection of books. Anyway, let's talk about what's actually in here. This is an excerpt. It's a scene that is not the only scene, and it's not the only inciting incident in the whole book, but you may remember that there were all these Maccabees that uprose against the Greeks and had to fight back for regaining Jewish identity. How is the story told? Like this. Source 1. People could neither keep the Sabbath nor observe the festivals of their ancestors, nor so much as confess themselves to be Jews. On the monthly celebration of the king's birthday, the Jews were taken under bitter constraint to partake of the sacrifices, and when a festival of Dionysus was celebrated, they were compelled to wear wreaths of ivy and to walk in the procession in honor of Dionysus. I'll just pause for a moment. If this starts to sound like the sort of thing that shouldn't be happening in shul, I'd say you're right. Okay, let's keep on reading. At the suggestion of the people of Ptolemais, a decree was issued to the neighboring Greek cities that they should adapt the same policy toward the Jews and make them partake of the sacrifices, those are idolatrous sacrifices, and should kill those who did not choose to change over to Greek customs. One could see, therefore, the misery that had come upon them. And if you're wondering what does this have to do with anything, next verse is key. For example, 2 women were brought in for having circumcised their children. They publicly paraded them around the city with their babies hanging at their breasts and then hurled them down headlong from the wall. A very gruesome story, historic or not. The circumcision as a visible sign of Jewish identity was a mark that led to all sorts of anti-Semitic oppression. The word they used back then was, of course, not anti-Semitic. The proper term may have been anti-Jewish, but they weren't speaking English, so what does it matter? But anyway, nonetheless, there is this oppression against people who bear this Jewish identity or relate to other people who are markedly, visibly Jewish. So, Jewish memory is a funny thing, just like memory is a funny thing, because we don't always remember the stories that happened hundreds of years ago quite right. And I'm ashamed to say that I even have some sketchy understanding of how my grandparents grew up, or how my great-grandparents may have come to the United States. And it's a shame to say that these are even things that my family has written down, and I still don't know it fully. So these are things that I should study better. These are things that I should learn better. But the book of the book of Second Maccabees was probably not terribly often read among the rabbis, if at all. The rabbis living approximately 400-ish years or so after the book of Second Maccabees takes place. Forget about when it's composed, but the book of Second Maccabees takes place around 167 BCE. We are now fast-forwarding in Jewish history to source 2, which is going to give us to the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is edited around the 5th century CE. So there are many centuries that have passed. More than half a millennium has actually passed from the moment that Second Maccabees takes place to the Talmud trying to tell the story of the real miracle of Hanukkah. And let's see just how terribly the Jewish memory worked back then. So source 2. I will read. I normally do like to call on people to read, by the way, but in this setting where only one of us seems to have a microphone, if you have a microphone, let me know. But I will do the reading here. So, what is Hanukkah? What is Hanukkah? Our rabbis taught in a teaching external to the Mishnah, edited circa 225 CE. So this is a really old teaching. So rabbis taught a long time ago. On the 25th day, in the Jewish month of Kislev, there are 8 days of Hanukkah, during which there shall be no eulogizing, and during which there shall be no fasting. Pause. It's interesting that the rabbis answer to what is Hanukkah is, well, here's some laws you should know about it. It's not, well, let me tell you what Hanukkah actually is. This probably isn't about the rabbis being hyper-legalistic. This is the way the rabbis usually talk. They speak in shorthand. They ask, what is that? And they tell you, well, let me tell you the laws. That's just the way that the rabbis like to teach and to operate. So don't read into that too much yet. But let's hear the rabbis tell a story now. This is why we do these laws. For when the Greeks entered the palace of God, they made all of the oils in the palace, that's the temple, impure. And when the kingdom of the Hasmonean house arose in strength and conquered them, those Greeks, they, the Israelites, the Jews rather, checked and did not find anything other than one vessel of oil that had been placed with the seal of the high priest, and in it was nothing other than the potential to maintain light for 1 day. A miracle was performed, and they made light from it for 8 days. And the next year they established those days and made them goodly festive days with psalms of praise and gratitude. Now, one of the great stories that we like to tell in the modern era is the story of Hanukkah. It is, after all, the story of Jewish might in a moment of Jewish weakness, and it is a story of Jewish organizing in a time of Jewish decimation. This is a story that is very inspiring, especially in the last 77 years, and especially since the rise of Zionism in its modern form over the last 127, I'm not good with numbers, but since Theodor Herzl was doing his thing in the late 1890s, let's say, right, modern political Zionism is something that very much gravitates towards the story of Hanukkah because it's one of these great stories of Jews actually no longer taking it from an anti-Semitic world, organizing and creating an autonomous Jewish collective. It's really powerful. And the Talmud seems not to be anywhere on the same page, which is ridiculous. The Talmud is entirely obsessed with oil. And they think that it's funny, by the way, that shemen, which is oil, and shmona, which is 8, and the chashmonaim also seems to have the shemen sound in it. The rabbis are all about the wordplay and not so much into the political implications or the idea that anti-Semitism nearly destroyed the Jewish people in this particular form or nearly repressed the Jewish people. The Talmud seems not to really care, which is bizarre. What I don't need to tell you and what I don't need to share with you on this source packet, because you all know it so well from living in the Jewish community, and if you don't live in the Jewish community and you don't know this, we'll have a 5-minute conversation, you'll be changed forever. The Jews really like Hanukkah. The Jews really appreciate this story, and there are so many parts of modern Hanukkah observance that actually have to do with moving God out of the picture just a little bit and moving human power more into the picture. So you might know the Hanukkah song, Mi Yamalel Gevurot Yisrael Lotan Mi Imne. And if you're live streaming, you can sing along too. It's just not in time. But Mi Yamalel Gevurot Yisrael is a direct quote from Psalms until you get to the word Yisrael. Because in the book of Psalms, it's not who will tell the things that befell. I'm not so good with the English, apparently. I'm working on that language. But who can retell the things that befell the people Yisrael? It is actually in the Psalms who can retell the might of Adonai. So God has been replaced by the Jewish people in this particular song. There are many examples of the ways in which God is replaced, or at least they've got the people Israel standing in front of God. Now, this isn't to say that what the Maccabees did was wrong, and this isn't to say that there's anything unrabbinic about what the Maccabees did, because they did get a little shout out, but it's really a little shout out. And the rabbis don't express clear comfort or clear discomfort with the way that the Hasmonean house behaved in this particular moment. The jury is out. Let's move on to a slightly different way of viewing this. We looked at this question from a lens of Hanukkah, of what do we learn about Hanukkah from Jewish history? What do we learn about what do we learn about anti-Semitism from the perspective of Hanukkah? What do we learn, though, about a rabbinic understanding of tefillin and anti-Semitism? Now, before I continue with any of this, you should know one of the most fun facts about tefillin, aside from that phylacteries is a weird word, one of the most fun facts about tefillin is that tefillin used to be something that Jews not only wore when they were davening in the morning, but it was something that the Jews just wore, except at nighttime, because then you bump into each other and it's painful. But you would wear tefillin really all day long, that there was something bright outside and people could see that sign, that symbol of you being Jewish. So tefillin are real clear markers of Jewish identity to the sages in the Talmud and to the sages who precede them in the Mishnah. So let's take a look on page 2 at source 3. Source 3, now remember, a lot of what the rabbis have to say is very legalistic. So the rabbis here are going to present to us a few different kinds of cases of what do you do with lost tefillin. And not to sound morbid, but it's a serious issue if you see tefillin and there is no owner. Because the tefillin were presumably made for somebody to wear, and if there are tefillin with nobody wearing them, that means that someone is gone. So it's actually a very sad thing. One who finds lost tefillin brings them into wherever they belong, pair by pair. We don't know wherever they belong really is. Let's keep going. Rabban Gamliel says one brings them into wherever they belong, 2 by 2. And by the way, if you're wondering what the difference is between pair by pair or 2 by 2, the rabbis also aren't sure, but some of them think that it's like a 4 by 4 thing, right? Because there's 2 tefillin each time, right? There's the arm, there's the head. So if you've got 2, you're taking like 2 arm things and 2 head things, right? So maybe that's the difference. But the rabbis, they have enough of this. Regarding what are these words actually spoken? Regarding old tefillin, as in tefillin that have clearly been worn, that have clearly been used, that have clearly been appropriated in some way. But regarding old tefillin, regarding new tefillin, one is exempt from the obligation to bring them to wherever they belong if it's Shabbat. By the way, that's an interesting dimension too, because if it is Shabbat and there is a traditional prohibition on Shabbat not to carry something from a public space into a private space, and you see that someone's real identity is lost, can you return it on Shabbat? It's an interesting question. Let's keep reading. By the way, if you think that the rabbis are going to settle this, that's not what they're here to do. All right. If one found these tefillin, though, arranged in set pairs, or if they were wound up, one waits for them, as in you wait for picking up those tefillin until nightfall, and then you bring them to wherever they belong. Because when it's nightfall, Shabbat's over. Now you can finally return those tefillin. But amidst danger, one covers them up and goes one's way. We're going to think a little bit about that in a moment. In fact, let's go to that moment. Let's turn to page 3 for just a quick moment to understand what does "but amidst danger" actually mean. This comes from, and I'm sorry that I separated the title of the source from the content, but at the bottom of page 2, it says this is from Rabbi Ovadia of Bertinoro in Italy, 15th century to early 16th century, a great commentator on the Mishnah. Just as many people today only study the Torah with Rashi, many people only study the Mishnah with Ovadia of Bertinoro. So let's see what he says. He talks about being amidst danger, for they have decreed an act of persecution, that it is not in accordance with the law of the land to lay tefillin. You don't need to read the rest of this specifically, other than just to know that he actually imagines that these tefillin have gone lost, have gone missing, and have been separated from their owner in a moment when Jews have been informed that they cannot be wearing their tefillin. So keep all of that in mind. Rewinding about 400 years, we turn to Rashi, great French commentator on the Torah, on the Talmud, on nearly anything that he saw. Rashi did a little bit of writing on this, and he offers a few other thoughts about these tefillin, actually. And this might change our perspective on what is a Jewish uniform. Just trying to give a little context of why I'm bothering to share with you Rashi here. Okay? So keep all this in mind. Regarding old tefillin, for the tying is recognizably made into the form of the letters of Shaddai. Shaddai, you might know, is one of God's names. It's in the shapes of the letter Shin, Dalet, and Yud. Frequently, if someone is wearing tefillin, the way that I do it, and there are different ways of wearing tefillin, but I often have the letter Shin across my palm. I often have a Dalet that one can find across the other side of my hand, and one can look at the back of my head and find a Yud knot. And then Shaddai, God's name, is inscribed upon me every time I wear my tefillin. And Rashi does a hysterical joke for all you people who love Aramaic to Hebrew jokes. He says devadai, which is Aramaic for Shaddai, as in this is certainly the case, or this is definitely the case, right? For certain, these are tefillin, and they have inherent sanctity. It's forbidden to lay them disgracefully. You can't let tefillin, something that bears the mark of both God and the wearer of the tefillin, the Jew, you can't let those things lie in disgrace. And the way that you know that these are really something that have been worn is if you can almost see that they're not so flexible anymore. They're almost shaped constantly into a shin, dalet, yud. They are constantly in the shape of God and in the shape of the Jew. But regarding new tefillin, one is exempt. Why would they be exempt from returning to the owner in this particular instance? From bringing them into the city or the home? They may simply be an amulet. This could just be a superstitious thing. If these tefillin have not taken on the shape of the Jew who wears it, and if these tefillin have not taken on the shape of the God for whom it's supposed to represent something, it's just an amulet. They have no inherent sanctity other than when they have been used in accordance with their halakha, in the Jewish law, which is for their own sake. Therefore, we do not desecrate Shabbat for these new tefillin. Now, I would say we're at a pausing point about tefillin, but the Talmud also loves to tell wacky stories. So why shouldn't we listen? We'll take one of the wacky stories that the Talmud likes to tell us about tefillin. We're going to learn about Elisha Baal Knafayim, which literally means, well, Elisha means Elisha. You could talk about what his name actually means, but that part is a little less important. Yeah, I'll tell you just so you're all cued in. So Elisha would really mean the God who grants salvation or redemption, or the God who likes broad spaces. We can talk about the real Semitic etymology another time, but anyway, that is who Elisha is. And Baal Knafayim means the master of wings or the owner of wings. Okay, now, Rabbi Yanai said, this is source 6. If you want to follow along at home or here, if this is your home, this is also home. So for Rabbi Yanai said, tefillin require a clean body, like that of Elisha Baal Knafayim. What is meant by this? Abaye said that one should not pass wind while enwrapped in them. Pause. You should know that we just went a very long stretch of reading rabbinic sources without there being a bathroom joke. So that was very impressive for the rabbis. Usually something gets to be very juvenile very fast when the rabbis start speaking in the Talmud. Okay, so this is one instance that the rabbis couldn't resist. Keep reading. Rava said, one should not sleep while enwrapped in the tefillin. That's how you know you have a clean body, because I don't know, when you sleep, you might schwitz, whatever, okay? Next, why did they call that person, though, Elisha Baal Knafayim? For once, the evil kingdom, I don't know if this is Rome, probably Rome, but the evil kingdom decreed a decree upon Yisrael that they would peck off the head of whoever would lay tefillin upon their head. So, you have tefillin on your head? No more head, okay? That's a not good deal, but I guess it's proportional. Anyway, but Elisha once laid tefillin and went out to the market, and one quaestor, that is a Roman official, saw him. He, Elisha, ran ahead of that quaestor, and that quaestor ran behind him. So if you've ever seen any Looney Tunes where there is one character running really fast and one character also running fast, but they're just right? There's sort of this distance in between them. That is very much what is happening here, okay? So there's the quaestor who's about to catch up to him. And when he finally reaches him, he, Elisha, lifted those tefillin off of his head and held them in his hand. Here comes the magic trick. That quaestor said to him, "What's in your hand?" Because remember, if he finds out that it's tefillin of the head, it's off with his head, okay? So what does Elisha say to that quaestor? Kanfei, the wings of a dove. That's how he gets his name. He stretched forth his hand, and inside it, kanfei, the wings of a dove, could be found. Therefore they called him Baal Knafayim, the possessor of wings. And why is it taught that the possessor of a dove is what he said and not, the possessor of some other species or fowl? Because the assembly of Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael, is likened to a dove. For it says, the wings of a dove are covered in silver and its limbs are impressed with greenness. That's in the book of Psalms. And just as the dove's wings protect it, the dove, so too Yisrael's mitzvot protect them. Do you remember that Rashi said that tefillin, without an owner and without God's imprint and without the owner's imprint, are just a mere piece of superstitious jewelry that you wear? Yes, these tefillin are these protective devices, but not necessarily these pious devices, apparently. So was it really necessary for the Jew, for religious purposes, to be wearing tefillin, or is it just a really good magic trick for outrunning Roman quaestors? It's a fascinating question, and one thing we should remember, though, is the Talmudic teaching, source 7, very fast, la samchinan nisa. We do not rely on miracles, right? So we don't actually use tefillin as a way of making sure that miracles will happen in our lives. Rabbi Michner, I saw you had your hand up.
It's a fascinating story. I mean, I was reading it slightly differently, and I wonder what you think of this, which is that the way, like, the only way that he was saved was because he pretended that tefillin was something else. It's not necessarily that the tefillin protected him, it's his ability to be clever in that moment with the tefillin and transform it into something else that protected it. So I'm curious how you would react to that.
Okay, so Rabbi Michner is saying, and tell me if I'm getting this right, that that she is reading this story as the tefillin having this protective quality because Elisha Baal Knafaim knows how to transform the tefillin from tefillin into something else, and that therefore, I think your point might be that the tefillin themselves might not even be so protective, but it might even just be the magical powers that he has, that he knows how to transform things. Is that what you're saying?
More that he pretended like it wasn't what it was.
He pretended that it wasn't what it was.
Just telling the Roman authority, like, no, this isn't actually the Jewish symbol that you think it is.
Okay, so
Way of, like, getting out of this situation.
so he's saying this actually isn't a Jewish thing, so I can weasel my way out of this one. That's interesting. There may be some dimension to that where he strips the device of its potency as a marker of Jewish identity. And that's an interesting thing, too. We will eventually, at the end, get to, well, what is a Jewish uniform and what isn't. But tefillin very much is, except I guess when it turns into a dove's wings, which is interesting. By the way, source 8 will actually give us some slightly bizarre but final words on, well, what halachic import does this bizarre fairy tale in the Talmud actually tell us? So Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein writes in his commentary on the Talmud, this is at the top of page 4, commenting on the story of Elisha Baal Knafaim. He says, in light of all this, it is inappropriate that a person who walks in a place of danger, when there is concern that on account of the danger one may need to tend to their bodily orifices, one should not lay tefillin. You remember the bathroom humor, it just sort of keeps recurring in the Jewish literature, apparently. But there is this idea that you might get so frightened that your body is going to have some reaction. I mean, he's imagining like kind of extreme reactions, but even if you're schwitzing, I've had a guy who sold me tefillin once tell me that I shouldn't wear my tefillin if I am sweaty, and then it became a lot longer before. Anyway, so I have the whole ritual. So look, there is a way in which your body is going to react potentially to real fears around you, or even to imagined fears around you, that the place of tefillin might actually be pushed aside for some time. That there should not be some Jewish identity marker that is going to do some undue damage to your body and the tefillin itself, that you will no longer have a guf naki, a clean body. Let's move forward to source 9. And we'll probably skip around in this. Source 9 is going to be more of a focus on a whole litany of concerns that Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan HaKohen had. If you think his name is too long, then you would be pleased to know that his friends just called him the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim, he got that name because he wrote a book called Chafetz Chaim. If you write a book, you get the name of the book. It's a nice deal, especially when you have such a long name. So Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan HaKohen wrote a rather long letter. Believe it or not, I'm giving you the shortened version. This is source 9, page 4. He is concerned about the state of the Jews in Russia. As you all likely know, there have been all different forms of religious suppression in Russia throughout so much of modern history, and he was very concerned by all of the various forms of laws being imposed that would restrict Jewish practice. And he, addressing his fellow Jews of Eastern Europe, says, "Behold, the voice of a cry of Bnei Yisrael in the state of Russia comes to us, that the ears of any listener may save them from the awful persecutions and terrifying decrees against the Holy Torah and those who study it. Torah scrolls and books of the Talmud, tefillin and mezuzot are being given to burnings because our many iniquities before the eyes of all in the streets of cities. In these days of ours, we see that the Holy Blessed One has punished us. Heaven forbid, measure for measure." You know, he says heaven forbid, but he really believes it. A lot of this might not be shocking that there are many Jews in the world who believe that bad things happen to bad people, right? We happen to be at a synagogue where the rabbi once wrote, "When bad things happen to good people," and that was a shocker, right? Because all sorts of bad things can happen to all sorts of really incredibly kind and generous and sweet people. But Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan HaKohen, he really wanted to understand why karma had been so bad for the Jews. What did the Jews do to deserve such terrible persecution in Russia? If we go to the third paragraph on page 4 in that source, the mitzvah of tefillin, which is the symbol by which we testify the oneness of the creator of the blessed name, who is omnipotent and the creator of the universe, which is the foundation of our faith. This God is publicly disowned before many of our siblings of Bnei Israel. And found among the assembly of Yisrael are many people who do not lay tefillin, and in any case, otherwise, just annul any relationship of commandedness to mitzvot, or reciting liturgy of the Shema, or prayers like the Amidah, and they do not accept upon themselves the yoke of the sovereignty of heaven and the yoke of mitzvot. You can kind of get the sense of where he might be going with this, but we turn the page, and for those who pray in synagogues and houses of study, these are just mostly our elders, and very few are the youthful children who go to pray. And of those few, many go to pray there just to recite Kaddish for their parents who died, because this mitzvah has been made null and meaningless to us. The Holy Blessed One has punished us also measure for measure. Midah k'neged midah, that we've done a bad thing, God's going to do a bad thing to us, or give some secular, some civil human body that is going to punish us for the ways in which we have sinned. We're not going to read the entirety of this source because you can probably get a sense of where he's going with it. And the way that he's going to end it, of course, is by saying that if we get really much more scrupulous, or scrupulous, is that the right word? Much more careful, fastidious, let's say, in observing our mitzvot, then we're going to have the days of Mashiach and Messiah come. Things will be much better. Now, there's a reason why I'm also glossing over this one quickly, mostly because its theology is so different from my own theology. I don't believe that bad things happen only to bad people and only good things happen to only good people, because it doesn't make sense why I have some good things happen and some bad things happen, unless I'm some bad. Anyway, it's sort of confusing to have that kind of theology. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I think that there's a lot of Jewish reason to believe otherwise. But he, nonetheless, preached if you want to live somewhere where you can wear tefillin all the time, all of us should be wearing tefillin all the time. If you want to live somewhere where you can wear your kippah all the time, all of us should be wearing our kippah all the time. That's kind of what he's getting at, which is an interesting idea. And we're going to see something very slightly similar, but perhaps not as theologically extreme. We will see something that's just a little bit more complicated when we look on page 6. Page 6, we're entering, believe it or not, sort of this final section of this source packet. We are going to first look at Rabbi Shlomo Chaim HaKohen Aviner, who's born in France. And he was a Holocaust survivor, and he's still alive, answering questions and doing hopefully positive rabbinic work in Israel. But Rabbi Aviner was asked this interesting question. You may recall that in the last decade or so in France, there have been all sorts of moments when wearing a kippah has been deemed incredibly unsafe, so much so that various French, Jewish, even rabbinic leaders, even Orthodox rabbinic leaders have told the Jews locally, don't go out wearing your kippah. And by the way, that was also an interesting thing. When our own family lived in Canada, there was a what was the term? It was the head covering ban that was taking place in Quebec. And there were various questions of, is this religious persecution to say that nobody can wear a mask, that nobody can wear a burqa, that nobody can wear a kippah, or all of these forms of religious persecution? And some of this just has to do, as many French rabbis and many French Jews have said, this is just about being a Frenchman, and this is a whole value that Americans don't understand, that there isn't just one way to be an American, but there is one way to be a real proper French person, which is an interesting idea. But we nonetheless have all these Jews who want to be Jews and visibly Jewish, and what do we do for these Jews? So Rabbi Aviner was asked this question: how should one relate to the instruction of the head of the community in Marseille, France, that one should not don a kippah in public on account of fearing danger? Does the value of pikuach nefesh, of saving a life, push aside the value of wearing a kippah? Whatever value wearing a kippah has, do you just have to protect yourself? Is that really what most matters? This is not our concern here in the land of Israel, writes Rabbi Aviner, which is not the most empathetic response. But let's keep on reading. It is appropriate to ask the rabbis of France. Also not so helpful, because he's going to keep on talking. Let's keep reading what he says. As it is known, the rabbi of Minsk is not allowed to adjudicate for Pinsk, and the rabbis outside the Holy Land do not rule regarding the land of Israel, nor do the rabbis in the land of Israel rule regarding outside the Holy Land. Nonetheless, regardless of practical halakha, but fundamentally, are we obligated, he asks, are we obligated to don a kippah upon the face of this earth, or outside of Earth, even if we were some astronaut on the moon? Indeed, both on account of expressing our awe for heaven and the law of expressing modesty. But is this not even more urgent in our circumstance, when in a moment of persecution it is forbidden to change even the customary practices of tying the lace of a shoe? And you might see that he is referencing a section of the Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 74a through b, where there is one rabbi who says that in the face of persecution, he would not even change the lace of his shoe to change who he is. A very powerful message, which, by the way, just because he says it doesn't mean it's right. But anyway, that is one thing that the rabbi says. Should this urgency not be all the more dire regarding a kippah, Rabbi Aviner answers, it depends. And he says, see the Shulchan Aruch Yored De'ah, Article 157. And I'm so glad that he tells us to look there, because he's about to butcher it. So let's see what he says instead of what it says. So here's how he's going to interpret this section of the Shulchan Aruch. Indeed, if Gentiles decreed that one should utterly defy the Torah, it would still be forbidden for a Jew to dress up as a Gentile. And this would be so if they decreed that Jews should dress as Gentiles. That's not in there. Keep reading. However, if they decreed regarding some other matter, it would be permissible for a Jew to dress up as a Gentile in order that those Gentile authorities not recognize that Jew and thus not kill that Jew. So just what is he saying here? Let's say the American government were to say that Jews from now on have to not observe Shabbat. Jews would be permitted, according to Rabbi Aviner, to no longer dress as Jews when in public, because this would be a way to protect the Jew from observing Shabbat in private. Which is to say that you can dress differently to protect yourself in some other circumstance. You just can't hear someone say, now you have to dress differently. You can't follow that law. But if the Jew chooses to dress differently, that's okay. Let's keep reading what he says. So too, if they decreed that Gentiles should kill the Jews, but did not decree that Jews should defy mitzvot, so too it would be permissible to dress up as a Gentile. So if you're being threatened, you can pass for not Jewish. With this, he says, in today's reality, it is permitted to go around without a kippah outside the Holy Land in places reputed for anti-Semitic dangers. He says you don't need that kippah on if you know you're in a dangerous anti-Semitic place. This also is fitting with regard to an Israeli who visits such a place. So now he's ruling for the Israelis. But he keeps going. There is, however, a simpler solution: to don a hat or a casquette, which are not exclusively identifying markers for Jews. So, I mean, when I go around in places that I suspect might not be very friendly to my Jewish identity, I am often wearing a Panama hat that my father-in-law bought for me. Not because he bought it for me, but because I like the Panama hat and it keeps my kippah covered. So that's one of my tips. And in summary, and by the way, I have no idea how this is a summary, but I love it. It is a great mitzvah to move to the land of Israel, obviously, not only because of the value of wearing a kippah, but because this is our holy land. That was a great turn. I like that part. Yes, I don't know your name. I'm so sorry.
The only thing I would comment is that's a great solution as long as you're somewhere where they're wearing hats. But you go inside and where men remove their hats, typically you would have your kippah. You can't keep a baseball cap, on. So it doesn't work in every scenario.
Okay, great. So Marshy, is that right? Marshy said that the great solution of wearing the hat or the casquette works really well when you're outdoors, but there are many places where it's a matter of respect to remove your hat. And then what are you supposed to do? Reveal that you're wearing a kippah, or just sin? What exactly is supposed to happen in those situations? Okay. It's a problematic text, but we're going to keep on reading just a little bit further. And by the way, in those situations where one is supposed to remove a kippah, like when I've gone to churches, I've usually been told, well, if you're wearing your kippah for a religious purpose, you keep it on. That's what the people at the church have told me. But I haven't been to all the churches just yet, so who knows? Let's keep on reading. Let's go to source 11. We're going to actually rewind in time because one of the sources that Rabbi Aviner actually did reference, but we didn't read his reference to it because I dotted that. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, one of the great Orthodox rabbinic authorities of the 20th century, he answered many great questions, and one of the questions that came about was, is it permitted, this is source 11, is it permitted to walk bareheaded for the sake of one's livelihood? And this question comes from the exalted honorable honor of our teacher, Rabbi Hillel Erlanger. May he live for many days, amen. Now, this question is great. If your job requires you to be bareheaded, what are you supposed to do about your whole kippah obligation? Behold, this matter, he says, that the exalted honorable one must understand is a livelihood for one which one is required to meet with the office's stakeholders. Let's say you've got business partners and they don't want to see you wearing that darn kippah. If they say to you that you got to remove your hat from your head and you've got to be there and to sit bareheaded without a kippah, which people call a yarmulke, seems to be a Turkish word anyway. If he wears there that kippah, they will not accept him at his work there. That's a real problem. What are you supposed to do when your job tells you don't wear your kippah? It seems appropriate, in my humble opinion, he says, that it is permissible in this case, as per the Talmud and the majority of methodologies, to be bareheaded. Indeed, walking through the market when bareheaded is only a concern for one embodying an especially pious character. The term that's used in the Talmud is midat chasidut. This is a trait of extra piety. So if you want to be especially pious, you wear a kippah, but not everybody has to wear a kippah. That's just the people who are especially pious. So he continues, should every person behave like this with such pious character? This rabbinic thinking does not know there to be such an explicit prohibition on being bareheaded. And this rabbinic thinking concluded that no law prohibits even mentioning God's name with a bare head. So if you've ever thought, I'm in shul, I don't want to say God's name without my kippah on, Rabbi Feinstein is here to remind you, well, it's not really a law. That's a practice. It's a custom. It's a minhag. Okay, keep going. Be that as it may, and as much as the whole Jewish people has become accustomed, though, to this kippah wearing, one does not easily deviate from the customs of uncovering one's head, which is not linked to the holy Jewish people. Still, it is not preferred that some religious action should lead to such a great loss. So you don't want to be losing your job over whether or not you want to be wearing your kippah. If this is so, then all the more so, this should be the case for a do commandment in the Torah, as opposed to a don't commandment in the Torah. You don't have to worry about what he gets at this ending here in this particular section, but he's differentiating between laws of the things that you must do, like you should eat matzah during Pesach, or you should sit in a sukkah during Sukkot, versus the things that you don't do, like the don't murder, the don't steal, etc. So he concludes, rather, wearing a kippah is a nice custom. That is the best. That one of the leading Orthodox poskim halachic authorities has to say about wearing a kippah is that it's a great thing to do, it's really nice, but there is no requirement for you to be doing so. Still, if you're in a place where everyone's wearing a kippah, you know that we're not going to give up on this kippah thing. So at shul, kippah is a good place. Outside shul, that depends how pious you are. That's a midat chasidut kind of thing between you and with whomever else you're pious in life. All right, now, how did we end up with kippahs? How did we end up with anything that would so seriously represent these Jewish symbols? I want to take us to a slightly less rabbinic source, in fact, incredibly unrabbinic. Let's go to Erlangen, Germany, where, well, actually better than Erlangen, we're going to look at the people of Schwab in medieval Germany in the year 1275. This is source 12. And this is written by some Franciscan friar who lived in Augsburg. We don't know very much about him because we don't know who he was. But what we do know is that he writes a book, a Schwabenspiegel. And a Schwabenspiegel is, and for all the German speakers out there, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a Schwabenspiegel is a mirror of the people of Schwab. This is what the people of Schwab were doing. So it's not him necessarily creating laws for the people of Schwab and around Schwab, but rather this is the way of life that everybody knows exactly what they have to do in life. And he says the Jews should wear hats which are pointed. Thereby, they are so shown for the Christians, such that one can consider them as Jews. Now, it's a little unclear what he's saying here. Is he making a law that the Jews have to start wearing pointy hats so that way the Christians know who's a Jew and who's not a Jew? Or is he saying that the Jews happen to wear pointy hats so that the Christians know who's a Jew or who's not a Jew. There are a variety of sources in the Middle Ages where it becomes clear that Jews are told that they have to wear special hats or that they might have to wear special badges. This is long before the Holocaust, but for so much of medieval Jewish European history, the Jews were required to wear some mark that distinguishes exactly who they are. And if you don't believe me, look at the photos. Oh my. So in the middle of page 8, you can see some reprints. This is from Dr. Naomi Lubrich, who I believe is the director of the Jewish Museum of Switzerland. But she wrote a great article, The Wandering Hat, Iterations of the Medieval Jewish Pointed Cap. And there are, throughout all different parts of medieval Europe, these clear instances of the Jews being depicted as the pointy hat people. And it's probably not the Jews' own fashion choice, because there is nowhere within our own tradition where we are told that we should be wearing pointy hats, right? We have things about covering our heads. We have things about having seriousness about our heads, and koved rosh is the heaviness of the head. But we don't have anything about they should look like this, right? There's nothing like they should point in a particular way or they should be goofy looking, whatever, right? So here we have, all the way on the left, we have the poet Suskind von Trimberg, who was a Jewish German poet, allegedly. Some of the earliest German poetry of I think medieval High German. I could be mistaken on that. And in the middle, we have, this is from a cathedral in Verona. You can find Jesus is in the middle, and there are all these Jews surrounding him. And the way that you know which ones are Jewish is because some of them have pointy hats. And by the way, there are some medieval images of Jesus wearing a pointy hat because he was Jewish. Why wouldn't he be wearing a pointy hat? So those are the people who both were good at history and bad at history. And then all the way on the right, you can see that there's someone was doodling in their Hebrew manuscript and they drew a Jew. So there are all sorts of moments in Jewish history where apparently this pointy hat thing or this kippot thing or this head covering thing or this tefillin thing, it's not always clear what it really represented to the Jews and whether it was something that came because of superstition or it became because of some anti-Semitic force. In fact, is it that anti-Semites want us to be wearing kippahs so that they can find us? That would seem to almost be the implication of the Schwabenspiegel source that we just read. So, do we change our uniform in the face of anti-Semitism? I think that the answer is it depends. I think the answer is that we all have different reasons and we all have different circumstances. We all have different thresholds for responding to our fears, to responding to our anxieties, to responding to threats that are real or threats that are imagined. It's hard to calculate which are threats that are real and which are threats that are imagined. And for some of us, a certain midat chasidut might inspire us to keep a kippah on or keep a Star of David earring or a chai necklace or a Hebrew word t-shirt. There are all sorts of ways in which our Jewish dress really might not change in the face of anti-Semitism. It may even be that the Jews wanted to be able to be distinct in a world that may have been distinctly anti-Semitic, and they found these obnoxious pointy hats. That could be a reality too. But what I do want you to take away from this is I do want you to know that these are questions that the Jews have been dealing with for thousands of years, and we still haven't really figured out the answer. We're all figuring out, really, what is the right uniform that might represent who we truly are and allow us to be who we truly are, allow us to be safe, and still, what is it that really best fits us? So, thank you everybody so much for studying together. And on this Chag Shavuot and this Zman Matan Toratenu, this time of receiving Torah, may we all find the ways in which we want to carry Torah and demonstrate our commitment to Torah in a world that could use a little more Torah. So thank you, everybody, and Chag Sameach.